Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. In honor of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, I'd like to kick things off with a conversation about what this month means to me and how I intend to celebrate. Instead of recording a solo podcast, I thought I'd have a chat with my favorite human, Oscar. We discuss the importance of AAPI Heritage Month and Mental Health Awareness Month. We also go down the Kung Fu rabbit hole and talk about the challenges of teaching students tradition in a modern world. It's always a fun conversation with Oscar, and I hope you enjoy the episode. If you do, please rate my podcast on your platform of choice and share it with others. If you would like to support with a donation to support my work and help keep this podcast going, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now, on with the show. Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. We are here celebrating AAPI, which is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And we're kicking it off with a, short and sweet podcast.
Yeah, sort of like a Q&A, where I do the Q and you do the A. Is that what we're doing?
Sure.
Or is it just going to go back and forth?
Sure. And, there's been one of the things that I always get a little bit confused about, and I am Asian American, so please do not feel concerned if you don't know what we have. Native Hawaiian, we have APITA with DESI, we have a lot of inclusion now in those acronyms as the world of acronyms go, but I will list them all here so that we can kind of learn from one another, because I am by no means an expert on all of that. So as the Congress in, I think it was 1978 established, was basically this is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, but of course it does include all of our Native Hawaiians and DESI community as well.
Okay, so that's good for me to know, because I don't know if this is coming across on video or audio, but I am not Asian American. So this is very educational for me.
Okay.
So if we start this off here, what does this month mean to you?
Okay, well, the thing about AAPI history or AAPI Heritage Month is that growing up, I didn't really identify so much as I'm Asian American, and so here comes May, and now we're going to do all these different activities. But because of Walam and the Kung Fu School and everything, there were always kind of shows or festivals or, that one-time celebration that we would get invited to. So I had kind of an awareness of it. But honestly, and, this is until very recently, at least in the last 5 years, where I started to kind of really understand what that means and what I actually feel like I should be doing. Right. I know the word should is a big... Ooh, but I feel...
Maybe more opportunities that you have.
Yes, more opportunities that I have is just to kind of learn, right? And so for me, I feel like it's an opportunity to kind of explore what that means, because what I said earlier was there's Asian, and that encompasses so many different countries. If I were a better student, I would have remembered from my conversation with my friend Khaled and how many countries. I think it's over 80 though.
Wow, okay.
It's quite a lot. And so just to kind of get a chance to learn a little bit more about these different countries and their cultures. And I think it's just, like anything else, it's a way to kind of honor our heritage. And I think it's a positive thing, right? But in the last year, it's really meant a lot different.
You've done a lot. Yeah. So
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned about is how to honor it. It sounds like educating yourself and learning about it, because we know in February with African American History Month we learn about things actually in school. There are some things that we learn, but yeah, myself included, education system that I went through, we did not learn, or I don't recall any Asian American history being taught to me either. So
yeah, well, as you know, since we are married and you exist in this domain where you have to hear all the crazy and the madness and all the work that I've been doing, but basically last May for AAPI Heritage Month, I decided to start a petition. Right. And that petition was to include Asian American, Pacific Islander history into our curriculum. Now, I can't control all curriculum. I can't control any, as a matter of fact, but specifically here in Florida, because that is where I live, I really felt that it was something that was important because I didn't get to learn a lot about Asian American history. And you'd mentioned, like, and you're from New York, so you would at least think somewhere where there's a bigger, higher immigration immigrant community, where there's a little bit more culture. There's actual Chinatown.
Right.
You know, there's different dynamics there. You know, somewhere like Florida, it's a little bit less growing now. But we had discussed that it's just really not taught. And one of the things that I was really drawn to was the tool of education as the solution to a lot of the anti-Asian hate crimes that we were seeing. And of course, last February, my podcast, not last February, 2021, I started off, kind of addressing that hate and my thoughts on it, and then build up after the Atlanta spa shooting to the AAPI Heritage Month. I was like, okay, I think I'll start a petition, and what harm could come from that?
So maybe you could describe the harm if you want, but maybe talk about the challenges that you've had with the petition, specifically being that we are in Florida, where there is a lot of divide, and it's not always evenly distributed, the divide. And so what are some of the challenges you had with that petition? Yeah,
so at first it was actually kind of exciting because the petition got a lot of traction and a lot of people were really interested in supporting it, and I was really happy about that. And then fast forward, that petition actually became something that allowed me to write a bill with our lawmakers. And so big thanks and heartfelt gratitude to Representative Anna Eskamani, who actually encouraged that and then kind of helped guide and let me know what that process was, because I didn't really understand how does a bill become a law and all of that stuff, and that we needed a House and we needed a Senate representative, and our other champion, Linda Stewart, came on board. And so it was something that kind of just really snowballed very quickly. And so the harm was that it was a lot of work on me and my life and any extra time or anything like that. You get to still eat all the time. I did feed you,
so you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, but so it was a lot. It was a really, really big undertaking, more than I had ever imagined when I started a simple petition last year. I hadn't imagined what the last year of my life would look like, leading up to now we are here celebrating AAPI Heritage, 1 year later. And of course, as most of our listeners and viewers and supporters know, that bill did not move forward in the House side, especially. The Senate side, I actually felt really strongly about. We were able to at least make it to the first agenda, and then from there, it was kind of a crazy day. It was very exciting, but the House, basically how it works is your bill has to get put in front of several committees, and it just depends. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 4, and we got 4, which meant it was going to be a challenge. And you have to go through each committee, and in order to even show up there, you have to be placed on the agenda, and we didn't even get placed on the first agenda. And after that, it goes to the House floor, and then it goes up for a vote. So there's a lot of steps in order for a bill to become a law, and it has to go through both the Florida House and the Florida Senate at the same time, and then that would be it. So as you know, it was very, very, very intense. I did go to Tallahassee and did try to advocate for it, met a lot of people, tried to talk to local lawmakers, legislators, different senators and House reps to try to, let them know that this was something that not just the Asian American community in Florida wanted, but other people, other allies and supporters and people who said, yeah, I want to learn more about Asian American history.
Right. So if you look back then to this past year of all of this, to use your word, snowballing effect, was it worth it?
Well, I will admit I guess it was late February, early March, I was crushed. My heart did break because I really felt like we had so much momentum and we had such an incredible turnout from the Florida community. So one of the things that I feel has been the biggest benefit, which of course to answer your question does make it worthwhile, is that the Asian American community came together across the state of Florida. So it wasn't just like here in Orlando, where I know a lot of people in the community because of Walam and the work I do. It was just the entire state. People from all these different cities, all reaching out, coming to Tallahassee to testify with us, sending emails, calling their lawmakers. And we're not really known to be like engaged in politics and to call our Congress and to call, you know, the senators and House reps. So I was so enthused to see how the community came together behind something that was positive, that was something that was going to continue to prevent anti-Asian hate crimes, that was going to educate others, that was going to just benefit so many people, right? So yes, it was absolutely worth it. I really do believe it's the foundation that has been laid for AAPI history inclusion, which, you know, shouldn't just be a one-time a year thing. Like only during May should we ever try to educate ourselves, and then the rest of the year just like ignore everything. I mean, and that goes for all of the other, you know, cultures, and, you know, like Black history, like we definitely do a lot to honor that, and we try to do that throughout the year. We read books, we have conversations with people, right? And so the point being as well, and this is something that I've had to share and learn myself, was that there is in the history books and in the Florida law an inclusion for Holocaust studies and Black history and African American studies or Black history and Hispanic heritage and women's studies. So there's an exclusion of AAPI history. So we're not asking for like, hey, we just want to be special and singled out. We're just asking for inclusion.
Inclusion, right. Yeah, and that's important. I think one of the things that I learned over the past year is the term Asian American history is American history, and that then every single type of heritage that we honor, Black history, Latin and Hispanic history, it doesn't matter, that it all is American history because everything is contributed to where we're at today.
Exactly, so, we're a country of immigrants. Right. I mean, and our Native American are the ones that have that. We're American, right? But then we're all immigrants, so it is all a part of who we are as America.
Right. So now then, moving forward, what do you see happening within the next year? So another big snowball effect?
Yeah. Prepare yourself. It's going to be very, very challenging again because, we didn't get the response we wanted, despite the fact that we had thousands, I think at least, people calling over the course of a year and asking for this and advocating for this. And, we have, I believe, over 14,000 people that have signed the petition. Right. So, and this is just from word of mouth. I joined the amazing coalition, Make Us Visible, and they have been unbelievably helpful and supportive in guiding us in the direction of like, okay, how can we get this done? Right. But that's just a handful of people as well. Those are just 3 individuals, big shout out to Kate and Jeff and Mike that are supporting other states to try to help get it done, whether it's through the legislative side or, through just trying to connect us with good resources for education and just being able to say, this is something that all states should have because, like you said, Asian American history is American history. And so now I have to start from scratch. So now I have to go back to the drawing board, write the bill again and find sponsors that want to support the bill and kind of be tactical about like, okay, now I've learned from round 1, how can I then move forward into round 2? Because we're absolutely going to continue fighting for it because we, like I said, we built the foundation and it's just going to take time. And in all honesty, this has been, again, the best thing is that all these diverse backgrounds have come together behind this bill. It's a nonpartisan bill. It is definitely shown that people from diverse backgrounds, both sides of the aisle, it's not a red versus blue thing. This is about education. This is about public safety. This is about keeping our kids safe. You remember last year we had this really great town hall with these amazing kids from like 6 to 21 in college, and they shared their stories, which were heartbreaking. And they're not the only ones that have those stories. So, we want this to be a preventive measure of making sure that our kids are educated, and then they can help educate us.
Yeah, so it sounds like the foundation has been set, laid, and then the progress for this education or the inclusion of Asian Americans is evolving. And then talking about things evolving, right? Because of the kind of the biggest thing that you do on a day-to-day basis, which is trying to preserve a traditional Asian culture of traditional martial arts, traditional Chinese martial arts, but also knowing that that has to evolve. But it's like you want to hold on to some things, but you have to also then be okay to let other things evolve. So where do you see that fitting in? Or actually, I guess we see it all the time, but where have you seen that kind of throughout this past year?
Well, from the education side, I really just feel like, there's already a curriculum, and there just needs to be inclusion, and there just needs to be a law for the inclusion. Right. And that aside, something we're going to continuously be pushed for. I think you're asking a little bit more specific to kind of this is more my personal take, right? My personal, where I teach, I'm a Sifu, which is Kung Fu teacher, and I teach a traditional form of Chinese Kung Fu. And what that means is we preserve it to the best of the best of our capability. And we preserve it to honor our teachers and, the art form itself, right? And so I think people who maybe do things like dance or other art forms kind of can find that same challenge, where are you a traditionalist and you can't take any modern ideas, you can't sully the palette, and you can't mix things. But so for me, it's always been really clear, actually, because for us in Wallam Kung Fu, there's very specific forms, there's very specific movements, and those movements don't really change. I think one of the things that you've actually brought to the table with your science and fitness and kind of exercise science background is making sure that we do them safely, making sure that we take all the new information that we know now about how the body works and moves, and instead of just jumping into that split, perhaps there's some steps that we should take before that, right?
Taking into account that we're not getting, when these things were initiated hundreds of years ago, we have a different population set now. So we just have to take into account that not everyone's going to be able to jump right in. But so that has been interesting to see over the past decade or so. But as far as trying to maintain that, hold on to the things that are set, one thing that evolved already is what you said, you're a Sifu, but technically, or in the past, there weren't really women Sifus, right? Sifu is a male term for teacher. So that's one way that Wallam and pretty much most traditional Chinese martial arts have evolved, because there are more female Sifus.
Absolutely. And that is something I talk about all the time, is the fact that even just my name and my title I'm an oxymoron, because in Chinese, each term usually has a male or female. Right. You don't just say a relative or something like that. It's always very specific. This is my mom's older sister or my dad's eldest brother. It's very, very specific in terms. And so the word Sifu itself is only referring to males. There's no alternative term. And there was a time where people would ask me should we then come up with a new term to find that, female counterpart? And that goes to you, right? So the wife of a Sifu is called a Simo, right? There's no term for husband of a Sifu. Right. And so they were like, well, does Oscar want to be Simo? And honestly, Oscar's...
I don't really care.
Which we don't call you Simo, because you yourself are now a Sifu too. But that's the point, right? There's no husband of a Sifu. That term doesn't even exist. And my thought process was, instead of coming up with a new term, kind of changing the perception of what that is and still holding on to the tradition of the word. I'm fine with it being a quote unquote male word in terms of the actual language of it. But I think it's important that now people can learn that this term and who I am and who we are can evolve. Now there are female Sifus, because women are allowed to do Kung Fu, and then now they progress and they earn the right to teach it, right? just because I'm actually the daughter of Grandmaster Chan gives me no lineage rights as a woman to be the, successor or the inheritor or anything. It's a position that absolutely had to be earned and was definitely not easy. So, but I've been very proud of the fact that I feel like I have had a stake in changing the word sifu so people would see that it is not just representative of men, but also women.
Right. So that is one way, where you're holding on to the tradition and also evolving kind of around it. One of the things I notice, especially because I come from that fitness industry, is we do a lot of certifications.
Yes.
Right. And so, for example, and they cost a lot of money and time.
Every year, Oscar's like, "Oh, there's this one I want to learn." He loves learning, so
part of that is this passion for learning, right? But then another part of it is then recertifying and making sure that you're at certain standards. And so there was something interesting that happened over the past few months at the temple, where we've had students who have in the past maybe gotten to a certain level, left for some time, and then come back and want to hold on to that same level. And so it's this weird thing, I think, that's happening where we're studying a traditional Chinese martial art, but then we're also influenced by being here in America and thinking, well, I've already gotten this, so I should be able to keep it forever. And so I just want to hear you talk a little bit about how can we maintain our traditional standards, but then maybe meet the expectations or change the expectations of the students or the practitioners. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah. So one of the biggest challenges I've always had is in a traditional Kung Fu school, there's several things that happen. We bow before we enter the building. We talk and speak in Chinese. And there's been resistance to even that, right? Well, why do I have to do this? And people who are religious, for say, or whatever, there's no bowing gesture. And just having to try to find that adaptivity, but also the whole I've earned this right. So I just said that I had to earn my place as a sifu. I have to continuously also do that every 3 years. According to the traditions of our style, according to the system that my father, Grandmaster Chen, has put in place. And, for me, that word is bond, right? Like, so he's decided, like, here's what it is. But also, you do Wallum Kung Fu, and you very much well know 1 week off, like we go on vacation, you're like, oh my gosh, you come back, and even just the recall of all of the techniques, of all of the intricacies that are involved, right? So it's kind of a living, breathing thing. And so by no means do we ever take away the achievements anybody has ever had. Like, we've even had Sifus who don't continue, and they say, okay, look, I can't keep up with this. I'm not going to certify every 3 years. I'm going to retire now. I'm going to go off and just just chill out. And I don't want to continue this standard because you've done the Sifu test and we've done a podcast on it, and it's grueling. It's really, really, really challenging.
It's a long weekend of hard work.
Kung Fu, hard work, right? And so I think there's something in your industry called continuing education.
Well, I think in almost every industry there's continuing education. So I don't want to bash any students that we've had in the past or currently, but I also don't want to talk in circles. Like, I think that's what I started that way. And the thing that happens, and I guess this is just because we're having this conversation, it's something that's top of mind, is you can have an instance of a student who trains. They leave for a few years. They come back and feel like they want that they're like, no, I don't need to retest. And to us, it's just like, where did our communication go wrong that we didn't make it clear? But there's that part, right, where we take our accountability. Okay, we didn't make it clear that you still have to make sure that you're still to standard, because if you were gone for, let's say, 5 years and you come back, you're not going to just jump right back to that same level. You kind of have to just work your way back. It doesn't mean you have to re-earn everything, right? It just means you have to just get spot checked. And I equate it to, if I just became a doctor and then something happened and I was like, well, I'm not going to practice for a few years, but I'm going to come back. I need a little bit of ramp up time. And so I guess the frustrating part, me being a non-Asian, but trying to promote a traditional Chinese martial art, is seeing, well, how can we, yes, meet students where they're at to be better with communication, but at the same time say, hey, this is a traditional martial arts style and you have to earn kind of your place in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just saying that there's a cultural divide, right? And so me growing up in this, even though I'm American, I've seen it, right? I've seen it over and over. You're talking about a recent thing where it's top of mind, but I mean, I could tell you every year since 1980 from my recollection of like, oh yeah, and then this person, and then this person.
Right.
Like there is a sense of entitlement to once you have achieved something, especially in Walam, like, okay, check, and you don't have to revisit that. But when we
but
talk
also
about,
that you own it.
that you own it, exactly. Exactly.
That's, I guess, maybe that's the bigger problem.
Entitlement and ownership, right? And so just because you've achieved something doesn't mean you then own it. And a good example that kind of goes down another rabbit hole for us is people who maybe say they trained for 5 years with us. And that sounds like a long time, but trust me, 5 years is you're still a novice. And then they go off and they think that they are entitled and that they own what they learn to be able to teach it to others without the permission of a Sifu or Grandmaster Chen at the ultimate stage of it, right? There's like thousands of those examples, and that's worse than, and that even goes to people who were Sifus and then have decided to do their own thing, and then they continue to. Continue to teach something they don't anymore longer have permission. And there's a lot of people out there that would disagree with this because they're not traditionalists and they see, well, I get to learn what I want and take what I want and therefore it's mine. But if you know what it means to be a student, a disciple of a Sifu in a traditional style, then you know better, right?
So we started off this conversation with Asian American and Pacific Islander History Month and Heritage Month, and then the importance of knowledge, of learning to then be better about honoring that and honoring, hey, Asian Americans are actually Americans, right? You can even take away the Asian if you wanted to and say they are Americans. We're just honoring their Asian heritage. So, but it came down to your venue for improving this is knowledge, right? Because knowledge is power. But then now we're talking also about you're promoting a traditional Chinese martial arts, which is you're giving people a lot of knowledge. And so there's the difference between, okay, I've learned how to do a kettlebell swing and I got certified to do a kettlebell swing. I am going to then teach that to someone else because I was, for example, I have a certification through Strong First, right? But I don't necessarily own like that I am the authority on kettlebells. And I think what ends up happening is, and I've seen it also with Walam, is you get someone who trains with us 5 years, but sometimes 3 years, sometimes 2 years. Sometimes someone comes in for a few months and learns a little bit of Tai Chi, right? Or whatever. And they take that and they say, well, I got this knowledge. Now this knowledge is mine. That part maybe like, okay, what I learned is mine, but not the part that now this knowledge I can now impart it on other people. And so I guess my roundabout thing is on this is with the Kung Fu part, where we're trying to separate or trying to maintain with the tradition, especially for Kung Fu, is you're learning this knowledge, but you don't have the right to necessarily teach it. It's a very traditional Kung Fu thing that we try to promote to the students of what does it mean to respect, to honor your school. Is you're learning things and knowledge is super powerful, but part of the embracing the culture of it is that you don't necessarily have the right, the authority to then promote it. That's not always the case with other things, because I'm a real big believer in when you read something, the best way to learn it is to then teach someone about it or have a conversation about it. But we have to then find a way to communicate this clearly to our students if we want to do a good job of promoting traditional Kung Fu of, yes, when you learn something, the best way to learn it is to teach it, but just not this part. You know what I mean?
Well, I think there's two different conversations there. One is you talked about reading and, let me teach someone about it. And you're like the extraordinarily extreme example of anytime you bring something up, you're like, and I read this and it was by so-and-so and I'm quoting so-and-so, and you're so careful to like give credit constantly where it's due and not like it's your own,
Well, no one has an original idea unless you were born in like 5,000 BC.
Exactly. Well, that's the point, right? And so this is where I think it becomes just more of an ego thing of people who get to a point where they take the knowledge and then they want to pass it off as their own, and that's a whole different thing. The martial side of it, the actual art form of it is very different, because when you do enter our doors at the temple, like we're very specific, like you do not teach others, that you are there to learn for yourself. And if you want to teach, then you have a conversation, and then we discuss like what that means. But I feel like if you're really a true martial artist, if you're a true practitioner in things, and I think even the strong first mentality is that you're a student first. Mm-hmm. Like even as an instructor who's certified, you're always a student first. And so if you constantly maintain the fact that you are a student, you're never going to try to be constantly the teacher. And you're going to have that humility to know like you're just always there to be learning. And in the terms of Kung Fu, traditional Kung Fu, especially Wallum Kung Fu, you really should just trust your Sifu at the end of the day.
You should. I guess part of this, the impetus for this kind of this rabbit hole that we've gone to, is the frustration that I get when you have students and there are people who are really good, decent people, and as instructors or as the Wallum Temple, we lose sometimes students like that due to there was some disconnect there, right? Because you got good intentions on one side, good intentions on another side, but there was something that was missed, a missed opportunity. And we always talk about, well, how can then we learn from this? This is a way now to be better about when we communicate, to students about these are the expectations that we have. And your point on humility is another thing that we say kind of and try to live by all the time. So I don't know kind of where to go with that, with this part of it. This conversation is just more of, we started this conversation with knowledge and how having that is important, and we want to spread it. But then how do we find that line to spread knowledge and maintain tradition? It's like this puzzle that we're just always trying to.
Yeah, I think, and when I did my documentary in 2012, now I can't believe it's so long ago, but one of the original themes was keeping tradition alive in a modern world, and constantly having kind of that balance and that struggle. And honestly, I used to think it was a much more challenging thing than I do now, because now I just feel like I live that.
Right.
And it's more like a day-to-day thing. Like it's just part of who I am and what I do. And so you're just constantly learning, because each generation is also very different of students.
Right.
Like how I taught in the 90s compared to now or something, like you're learning that people are also a lot more considerate in the way they may approach or ask things, because maybe there's a little bit more conversation around Asian American culture, and maybe a slightly more awareness of what, there's a lot of respect ingrained in our culture and things like that. And, coming back to AAPI heritage, and this is just the Chinese culture we're talking about. This is a very thin slice of, I wish I had the number. I'll list it here in the notes, but, of the numerous countries in which they all have their own set of, moral compass and different things not moral compass, but in terms of like their principles, right? And like what they follow and culturally why and some of their philosophies, I think is what I meant to say. And so I feel like this is such an opportunity during this month to kind of recognize and be like, hey, wake up everyone, it's the AAPI heritage. What does that mean? Yeah, you could show up at a festival and eat a bunch of different cool foods, because yes, food is a huge part of the culture, and probably
and it's delicious.
And probably the part that brings us all together. Like we can all agree on, let's go eat something delicious, and that would be good honoring. But I think taking that even one step further is a little bit more acceptable, and I think we should ask more of ourselves and say, can you name a notable, Asian American from, the Indian culture or, the Korean culture, or, it's just there's so many. And I have always felt so lacking in that area, even till now. Even as I've worked this last year, I went to talk to legislators and they looked at me like I'm some sort of like history teacher, like, oh, you must know a lot about Asian American history. I'm like, no, the reason I'm sitting here is because I know nothing about Asian American history.
Right.
And the more I find out, the more amazed I am, and the more inspiring it's been when I'm able to even share these small tidbits with kids, because we talk about why is that important for children. Well, when I was growing up, I didn't see an Asian Barbie doll or a superhero that I could look up to and feel represented.
Right.
One of our students actually asked a question about, should Shang-Chi have been this or that, or, all of this. And then, not Shang-Chi, I'm sorry, Iron Fist. Right? Like, should that have been an Asian character? And, because Shang-Chi's the only one that I could think of that had that Asian heritage that seemed positive, right? And so, and it was like, well, we don't feel like we should change things necessarily. And it's like, but there are so many white male superheroes and
it's okay if Iron Fist becomes Asian.
I think it's okay.
Yeah, I think it's going to be okay.
And it's not that, it's not the change, it's just more of the, had a lot of people around me had that growing up, and then even non-Asians seeing that, oh, Asian Americans aren't just the butt end of a joke in a lot of these 80s films. They're not the silly, goofy guy or the nerdy guy or whatever. Like, had they felt that had they had that representation, bullying wouldn't have happened. We talk about all the time the things that we might have said that have made an impression on someone's life in a negative way. Mm-hmm. And there's just so many opportunities that could have been with representation that's positive.
Well, it's coming back to that, the importance of knowledge. Like when you say that you went and spoke to these representatives and they were asking you, oh, you must know a lot about it. And you're like, no, I don't. But having a little bit more information makes any experience more enriching, right? So like if you think about food, well, I would enjoy food even if I didn't know that much about it. But I know that like when you make a meal, I know all the ingredients that go behind it and the kind of the care that goes into building
from our garden,
right? And kind of knowing that enhances that experience. And so in the same way, when you have a conversation with an Asian American, it could be Chinese or it could be Korean or it could be Japanese or the hundreds of other ethnicities that are or countries that are in that Asian population. But when you have a conversation, get some context, learn a little bit more, get that knowledge, it makes that experience a lot more enriching. And I think if we would, one, assume the best intentions on people, because most people are not assholes. I think most people aren't deep down, or we don't look at ourselves like that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, know, and this is a really great line from a previous podcast you had with Coach Dan John, where he said something to the effect of, well, I'm a really good person who has done really bad things. I am also a really bad person who has done good things. And that kind of yin yang, so to speak, like that we all possess and that we're all kind of fighting. But the narrative that we tell ourselves is, no, I am a good person. And so trying to spread, have more communication, things like this podcast, you trying to educate people through helping push this legislation, you trying to educate people as a Kung Fu Sifu, all of these things hopefully will have a good, positive, long-term impact in the long run. And it comes down to that trying to learn, be open, everything that we've talked about so far. So.
Yeah. A lot of people do ask that, like, oh, how can I be better? What can I do? And it's just like, have a conversation. It's the same thing after the George Floyd murder. And we were like, okay, we're reading How to Be an Anti-Racist. We're like absorbing as much as we can. We're trying to have conversations. We're trying to listen and be aware because, oh my gosh, how much more, does the community need to take from having all of those horrors, right?
One of the best books I've read last year, Cast, by Dr. Wilkinson. Yeah, it was amazing.
Isabel.
Yeah. An amazing book. So, but anyway, yeah. So, and what does that do is that book, well, it was written so beautifully. She's an amazing writer. She's an amazing writer, but written very beautifully, made great analogies, connected dots, and it makes for you to then look at other people and their experiences in a different light. Mm-hmm. And something like, I mean, even before doing this trying to pass this bill for education, something like spreading Kung Fu is a big thing that your parents have done to probably, it's probably hard to imagine the amount of people that they have positively impacted, changing the perception of how they see Asian Americans, right? I don't think we could put a number on it.
Yeah, it's hard to quantify because you're looking at over like 50 years of work worldwide.
Right.
I mean, you and I, we've been around the world where people will recognize who he is.
Yeah, they're like, "What? Are you Master Chan?"
From Africa or from South America. I mean, just the worldwide impact of, like you said, what that means. And then like layering, right? So yes, we're upholding, his Chinese culture and that tradition, but at the same time, he very specifically chose to come to the United States of America.
Right.
He understood what the American dream was at the time and really bought into that freedom and ability to make the choices to share something that was closed off to other cultures. Like even in America, it was closed off.
Right.
Like in the Chinatowns of Boston and New York, it was very frowned upon to share with outsiders, right? And then why does that happen? Because people have made them feel like outsiders, and like there's chicken and egg of that, right? And so 100%, the impact is...
The impact must be exponential.
And exponential.
We didn't plan actually this, but just, I think maybe 3 days ago, your father was here having a conversation about coming to America, and I may be mistaken, so you were there, so you correct me if I'm wrong here, but I could have sworn he said something about, he was talking to someone else, one of his students, and said, I only learned 3 years of school, or 4 years, whatever, of
school,
of whatever he goes. Yeah. He goes, but that's why you come to America, because you have this opportunity to learn. Like there was some connection he was making about the lack of opportunity that he had to learn because he had to go, do what he had to do.
Farm
right. But then at no matter what age, you can come to the U.S. and learn. And by learning, you get all of these opportunities. And so it kind of comes back to the power of that knowledge and learning.
Yeah, education. And it doesn't, and I think there's a misunderstanding of what education always means as well, right? Because it comes in so many different forms. And you just discussed, reading books and everything, having the conversations. But I think the conversations are highly overlooked on how important they are, right? You just saying, like sitting over at the dinner table and hearing that and that connectivity and what that has now whirlwind into this conversation. But, absolutely, kids need to go to school and learn there. But beyond that, there's so much more opportunity of education and understanding that we can have through these conversations. I think it is the reason I started the podcast, right? To have conversations, to learn, build empathy, and that hopefully will have some sort of exponential effect. Maybe perhaps at the quantity of what my father and my mom has planted, but
those things are unknown, right? I think it's like almost impossible to quantify. But if I were to give a tip on how to start conversations, I'm going to give you 2 tips from experts. Number 1. Sifu Mimi Chan of the Sifu Mimi Chan show just says hello, hello. So that's a great way to start it. And then number 2, from that same conversation, Master Chan, very simple words is, okay, you tell me your story. So there's like an inside joke there, but literally those are the words he said. Like, all right, you go ahead, you tell me your story to his student.
Yeah.
And I think back, we kind of all really laughed about it and thought how funny that was. But what a really great way to try to find out about someone. Okay,
yeah.
Go ahead, tell me your story.
Well, shout out to Sifu Leroy in Knoxville, who came to visit and show up for a Wallam event. And that's part of it as well, as kind of showing up for the conversation. If you're not making the effort to go and speak to someone, you don't get the opportunity to then even share your story. So it's not just listening, but you also get the opportunity to share.
He has great stories also. Sifu Leroy in Knoxville. But yeah, exactly. He is a great example of someone who is will make the journey on his motorcycle hundreds of miles to be there, not to say, hey, I'm going to have a conversation, but to say I am here and I'm just available. What do you need? Listen, talk, anything. So
yeah, and so that's the whole thing about AAPI Heritage Month, right? It's about being able to celebrate, embrace, but I really think at the end of the day, to me, what it means when you asked me at the beginning, I think it's about learning and taking that mindfulness, taking that time. to kind of learn. And I will hopefully a little later this month be able to discuss, but it is also Mental Health Awareness Month. And I definitely don't want that to be overshadowed or like pushed aside, because I actually think it goes hand in hand, especially with Asian Americans, because it is something that is very taboo to talk about in our culture. And I have been trying, not saying single-handedly, but like in my little circle of wallam in my walls, and we call the compound, I've definitely been trying to destigmatize that and to make sure that people understand that mental health is important, that therapy is good, and that there's no shame in that, right? And so I think that when you talk about tradition and modernism is also something that is very intertwined, where traditionally we are, we keep our feelings in, or you don't share them, and that's something like that would be very taboo or very frowned upon. And I definitely think with Mental Health Awareness Month, that's something that us as Asian Americans need to learn to embrace publicly. I know that it's always really hard, and I never like to really push people to say, oh, you have to do this. But at the same time, I really feel like being public about it personally has helped other people.
Right.
And if that happens, then that's positive.
Yeah, I mean, I look at that, the mental health, as the same way as I love physically training the body. It's just training your brain and your thoughts and your mind. And in the same way that you would practice movement and learn something about your body, having a conversation with a therapist is training and learning something about it. So I think if we could find a way to get people to think about it as, oh, I'm just learning more about myself, which will help me become a better person. If you're a better person, you can help other people, and the entire world will be fine.
We have now fixed all of the problems in the world.
End, right? The end.
Well, Oscar, as always, my favorite co-host.
Right. Well, I am honored to be here with you anytime.
All right. Happy, I guess, Asian American Pacific Islander Month, and
honor. Go ahead and honor.
Yes, honor it, and also Mental Health Awareness Month. And we will be hopefully having conversations throughout the month with other Asian Americans and their experiences. If at the very least, I've had a plethora of conversations with Asian Americans, which I will continuously post on my social. So please listen and let me know what you think. Tell me what you've learned, or if you have questions, because a lot of my guests are so cool. They come back on the show, and we like to have these conversations and learn from one another. So thanks a lot.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to The Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.